many states in the US, keeping a squirrel at home is illegal. Now, add to that the fact that squirrel videos are among the most popular animal videos on YouTube and social media platforms like Instagram, getting millions of views. Now let me ask you a question. If a small animal, like a squirrel, lives with a person for years, wears clothes, eats breakfast, and posts cute videos on Instagram, is that animal still wild or has it become domesticated? And more importantly, should the law treat it as a danger or as a member of the family? Today, I want to tell you a strange but true story. This story starts with a little squirrel named Peanut, but gradually it leads into discussions that bring law, science, and even politics into the mix. So stay with me until the end of this video to learn more about squirrels, these cute, furry little creatures, and to hear the secrets of the strangest legal case involving an animal. Alright, let me tell you a fact. Squirrels are even cuter than you think. Squirrels are small, adorable creatures that live almost everywhere on Earth, and they love to run, jump, and play on tall tree branches and in grassy fields. Of course, while they're super energetic, very social, and quite cute, they're also stubborn and will bravely fight others for food or bravely fend off danger. Squirrels are extremely smart and are considered the Einsteins of the animal world. Jokes aside, they can easily trick predators or escape from them. Squirrels communicate with each other by making squeaking sounds similar to a dog's bark and by wagging their tails. For example, when danger is near, they warn the others by flicking their tails. Their squeaking is usually for playing, but when their sound turns like a dog's bark, it means they're really angry. An interesting fact about these furry creatures is that their teeth never stop growing because they eat foods that are usually very hard, like hazelnuts or acorns. That's why their teeth break or wear down quickly. But they have an evolutionary trait where they grow about 10 to 12 centimeters, which is roughly 5 inches of new teeth each year. This trait is also seen in animals like rabbits and mice. But squirrels have a very diverse diet and are kind of omnivores. From acorns to fruit, nuts, mushrooms, small insects, bird eggs, and even some small animals like newly hatched chicks and reptiles like lizards. There have even been cases of cannibalism among them. In short, even though these creatures are small in size, their appetite is truly huge. It's worth mentioning that squirrels can fall from any height and survive. They reduce their falling speed by rotating their hips while falling, flattening their bodies, and using their tails as an air brake. But just because you've heard this, don't try to test it by throwing a squirrel off a high place. Jokes aside, they really are tough little creatures. They're so resilient that they can survive both in untouched forests and right in the middle of city buildings. You've probably seen the Ice Age animation, where there's a famous, funny, and admittedly unlucky squirrel named Scrat who's always chasing after a particular acorn, and every time, hilarious and bizarre things happen to him. With his strange movements and reactions, Scrat is kind of a fantastical and exaggerated example of this endless resilience and persistence among squirrels. On top of that, squirrels have an amazing long-term memory. They can remember exactly where they've hidden their food. We see this in the Ice Age animation as well. They even remember people. So if you feed them once, they'll come back to you again. Of course, their senses are also very sharp. Even though squirrels are born blind and hairless, when they grow up, their vision is so good that they can see around them without even moving their heads. Plus, their sense of hearing is amazing, which allows them to pick up on sounds from very quiet to very loud and sense danger. On the other hand, their strong sense of smell helps them easily find hidden food. They also play an important role in the ecosystem because many times the seeds they bury later grow into trees, which helps forests grow and produces food and oxygen. lot of people love squirrels and enjoy watching their playful antics. But overall, the squirrel is a wild animal and might not be a good choice as a pet. Just because you put out food for squirrels in your yard and see them from time to time doesn't mean you can necessarily domesticate them, because unlike dogs or cats, they aren't very trainable. On the other hand, in many places, like many US states, keeping a squirrel is illegal and permits are only issued in special cases, such as for raising orphan squirrels. Now, imagine someone finds a baby squirrel and wants to take care of it. It's better not to touch it, because usually the mother comes back for her baby. But what if the mother squirrel has been hit by a car and died? Well, that's where Peanut's story begins. In 2017, Mark Lango was coming home from work when he saw that a car had hit a mother squirrel. The baby squirrel was left all alone and scared. Mark couldn't find a shelter for it, so he decided to take care of it himself. He named her Peanut and fed her with a bottle for 8 months. When Peanut grew up, Mark released her into his backyard. But Peanut, who had been away from nature since she was little, couldn't survive in the wild. The next day, she came back to the door with half her tail missing. Mark opened the door and Peanut ran inside. And from then on, Peanut lived with Mark. Well, as I mentioned, keeping a squirrel is illegal in many places, including New York. Of course, Mark was trying to get an educational animal permit for Peanut, but it took 7 years to get the permit, and by then it was already too late. During these years, Mark created an Instagram page for Peanut, and little by little, Peanut became a social media star. Mark even became famous as Peanut's dad, and his business really took off. In 2023, Mark and his wife moved to upstate New York, started a farm to care for rescued animals, and named it Peanut's Freedom Farm. However, Mark Lango did not have a wildlife rehabilitation permit. So, in January 2024, a few licensed wildlife rehabilitators filed complaints against Mark for keeping wild animals, and the Department of Environmental Conservation began investigating Lango's case. At first, they warned him that keeping a squirrel was illegal. Apparently, he claimed that he had released it back into the wild. But after checking Lango's social media, they realized not only was Peanut still with him, but he also had a raccoon named Fred. In October 2024, Mark received another round of complaints. Maybe this time it was just a bunch of jealous, idle people on Instagram. And on October 30th, officers from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation went to Mark's house and took Peanut and Fred away. Mark Lango says the officers came in very aggressively. Their operation took 5 hours, and they treated him like a terrorist or a drug dealer. When they tried to take Peanut, he bit the officer's gloved hand, and they thought he might have rabies. But since there's no way to test a live animal for rabies, they killed both Peanut and Fred to test them for rabies. However, the test results came back negative. Now, if you're even a little familiar with rabies, you should know that the only definitive way to diagnose it is by examining the animal's brain after death. That's why they decided to kill Peanut and Fred so they could examine their brains. But the point that many people have brought up is that this action was completely unnecessary. Because if an animal really has rabies, it will die within less than 2 weeks or show very severe symptoms. So the fact that one of the officers was bitten is a sign of fear, not rabies. It's obvious that when an animal realizes it's being forcibly taken from its home, it's going to defend itself. This incident blew up on social media. Even several political figures from both parties reacted strongly. In fact, some Republican representatives considered this incident a symbol of government overreach in controlling private property and animals and called for an independent investigation. On the other hand, some Democrats emphasized the need to review wildlife protection laws to prevent similar mistakes from happening again. In this way, the incident turned into a controversial political issue. Even Donald Trump's campaign, Donald Trump Jr., and Senator J.D. Vance used this issue to question the performance of the Democratic administration. Trump Jr. wrote in his social media posts that we have 600,000 criminals in the country, but for a single unauthorized squirrel, the authorities swoop in and kill it. Is this your democracy? Elon Musk also wrote that the government kidnapped and executed an orphan squirrel. Even New York State Representative Jake Blumenkrantz introduced a bill called the Peanut Act so that the government can't easily confiscate people's animals. This bill stated that before the government executes an animal, they must allow 72 hours and hold an administrative hearing to review the animal's condition, vaccination records, potential danger, and alternative options like quarantine or returning it to the original owner. However, this bill is still in the early stages of legal review, and it's not clear when it will be passed. In a statement made by Judge Neil Gorsuch at the annual meeting of the Federalist Society, he referred to the peanut incidents as an example of government overreach and abuse of power. Also, on the popular comedy show Saturday Night Live during the Weekend Update segment, Sarah Sherman played the role of Peanut's widow and humorously addressed his death, which received a lot of media attention. But personally, I think killing two innocent animals in the name of caution or protecting society was more of an overreaction than a scientific or logical decision. But what do you think? If you were in Mark Longo's place, Peanut's dad, what would you have done? Be sure to write your thoughts in the comments. Overall, squirrels are truly cute creatures that we might genuinely like to keep as beloved pets. But Peanut's tragic story clearly shows that love and concern, if not properly guided by the law, can indeed end in profound tragedy.